The knock was soft but urgent. In the shadowed hallway of a Boston home flickering by candlelight, Paul Revere paused, heart thudding against his ribs like a drum of war. It wasn't the knock that unsettled him. It was what it meant. It was the signal he had waited for, dreaded, and trained himself to be ready for. The British were on the move, and someone had to warn the colonies. That someone was him. April 18, 1775, wasn't just another spring night. Boston simmered with unrest. British troops known as regulars were preparing to march. But they weren't marching to drill. They were marching to crush a rebellion before it even bloomed by arresting two men who carried the flame of liberty, Samuel Adams and John Hancock. And Paul Revere knew if they were captured, everything would unravel. The revolution would be strangled in its crib. He stepped into the cold night, saddling his horse with trembling hands. It wasn't fear that shook him. It was urgency. Time had become the enemy now. Behind the scenes, British ships loomed in the harbor like predators, and Revere, a silversmith by trade, was about to become a symbol of resistance. His task was simple in theory: ride to Lexington, warn Adams and Hancock, and rally the militia. But nothing in war is ever simple. As he galloped through the deserted streets, every shadow felt like an ambush. Every creak of the saddle echoed like a warning. The plan was set. If the British advanced by land, one lantern would shine in the steeple of the Old North Church. If by sea, there would be two. Revere's eyes searched the church tower as he passed. 2 lanterns. 2. The regulars were crossing the Charles River. They were coming by sea. He pressed his heels into the horse's side. The wind clawed at his cloak. Ahead, the first village slept peacefully. He didn't shout, not yet. Stealth was still his ally. He leaned forward, whispering to his mount, as if the beast understood the weight of this ride. "We ride for liberty," he murmured. "For freedom." The first warning came in silence, a tap on a door, a hushed word to a sentry. From one home to the next, like sparks catching dry grass, the alarm spread. The British are coming, not a cry of panic, but a call to arms. Farmers with pitchforks, merchants with muskets, boys barely past childhood clutching powder and shot. The ride had just begun, but the British weren't blind. They had spies, loyalists, who watched and listened. And as Revere moved from village to village, his path was no longer clear. Redcoats had begun deploying patrols to intercept any riders spreading alarm. In the moonlight, he spotted a glint, steel reflecting cold starlight. A patrol ahead. He veered off the road, plunging into a thicket. Branches tore at his coat, but he didn't stop. His mission was bigger than comfort. He burst out onto another path and pushed harder. His horse, loyal and frantic, carried them like a shadow in motion. Blood roared in his ears. If he were caught, it wouldn't just be prison. It would mean silence, failure. Suddenly, hoofbeats from behind. Another rider? A spy? A redcoat? He risked a glance. William Dawes, another patriot. Relief swept through him like rain after fire. Together they pushed toward Lexington, but the road ahead held more danger than either could know. As the church bells of Lexington neared, Revere allowed himself a breath. They had reached the town. He dismounted and rushed to the house where Adams and Hancock were staying. A man answered, half asleep. Revere didn't wait for formality. "The regulars are coming," he said, low and sharp. "By sea. You must flee." Inside, the candlelight trembled. Adams looked grave. Hancock, ever bold, reached for his coat. "Then we shall not run," he said. "We shall fight." Revere gritted his teeth. "Then I must ride further. To Concord. The munitions must be moved before the redcoats reach them." And just like that, he was off again, into a night painted with revolution. Revere rode harder now. Lexington was behind him, but the real prize lay ahead. Concord, British forces planned not only to capture revolutionaries, but also to seize hidden stockpiles of weapons, muskets, gunpowder, cannons, the tools of defiance. If those were lost, so was the cause. By now, the British knew someone had slipped their net. Redcoat patrols multiplied. The road twisted through forest and farm, moonlight now broken by clouds. Revere and Dawes met another rider, Dr. Samuel Prescott, young, brave, and willing. He joined them without hesitation. 3 men now carried the burden of freedom. Then it happened. The trap was sudden. As the riders rounded a bend, British troops stepped from the shadows. "Halt in the name of the Crown!" The voice rang with authority and the promise of steel. Dawes turned sharply, vanishing into the darkness. Prescott kicked his horse and galloped through a field, disappearing into the trees. Revere, surrounded, was captured. They demanded his identity. He gave it. They threatened him with loaded pistols. Still, he told them the truth. He had already delivered the warning. It was too late. The countryside was awake. The militia was gathering. The British were furious. They took his horse and held him until the first signs of dawn. But they didn't kill him. He was too well known, too connected. By the time he was released, the hills of Massachusetts were alive with revolution. Dr. Prescott made it to Concord. The militia moved the weapons to safety. The British would arrive to find almost nothing, but more than that, they would find resistance. At dawn on April 19, 1775, the first shots of the American Revolution were fired in Lexington. No one knows who pulled the trigger. But when the smoke cleared, 8 patriots lay dead. Blood soaked the soil that would one day be known as the birthplace of liberty. The British pushed on to Concord, but there they met more than resistance. Minutemen fired from behind stone walls and trees. Redcoats fell in droves. It was no longer a quiet protest. It was war. And in that war, Paul Revere's ride became legend. He didn't win a battle. He didn't fire a shot. But with a whisper, a ride, and a mission, he lit a spark that would grow into a wildfire. From Boston to Virginia, from the halls of Congress to the battlefields of Saratoga. His courage that night became a story every child would one day hear. The ride ended, but the revolution had begun.